One win down and at least 5 more to go, and this is the last free one they've got on the schedule. So week 4 is about staying healthy, getting the new running back core situated, and letting both these QBs master their craft before a real defense comes to town. The offense might have some flaws, but we saw how effective they could be when they cut back on the turnovers, play with confidence, and just waits for the defense to slip up to make some big plays. Louisiana Tech's averaging over 30 points a game so far, but they won't see a defense like this all year, and the Blackshirts are still looking for their first touchdown of the season. So today, we'll talk about what we can learn in a win this week. I'll go through the top storylines I'm keeping tabs on, and you'll get my game preview and final score prediction. But what's up, guys? I'm Connor Hayden, and this is Corn Crazed. If you're a fan of Nebraska or the Big Ten, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the videos that I drop. And if you think Nebraska runs for over 250 yards this week, hit the like button and help us get to 1,000. But now, let's get into it.
Thompson winds up, goes deep, got a man, touchdown!
I know a lot of people who won't watch games against Group of 5 competition because it's usually a blowout, and if it isn't, they're just going to get pissed off watching their team struggle. But I'm not one of those. I watch summer practice highlights, so I'd never miss a game no matter how weak the other team is. The real question most of us are asking isn't can they win, it's how far can this team go? Are they a bowl team? Is there potential for a top 25 upset? Or can they compete in the West to keep things interesting all the way deep into November? It's kind of a week-to-week deal, so it's hard to know any of those answers. But on Saturday, there are 3 things we can learn about this team to give us a better idea of where things are going. So let's talk about them. Number 1, can Jeff Sims play mistake-free? And when I say mistake-free, I don't mean 0 turnovers and never staring receivers down, because that's just not realistic. I'm okay with a fumble or an interception here and there, but multiple in a game isn't acceptable. And to be the starting QB at a school like Nebraska means you have to at least look like you know what you're doing. He spent a week watching another guy play his role pretty damn well, and the hope is that now that he's had a chance to catch his breath, focus more on how he can improve his game as opposed to spending a ton of time in prep mode, that he'll get closer to playing how he did in those games at Georgia Tech when he was throwing for 300 plus yards on the day. Number 2, can Anthony Grant be the bell cow Nebraska needs? Well, he tried last year, but as the season went on, it seemed like he declined a little bit. And part of that's because the run scheme was trash and they weren't creative enough to help the O-line. But the other part was that he was the only one running the ball. Now, unlike last year, no matter who the QB is, they're going to be expected to run it at least 15 times to help him out. So 15 carries a week out of Grant with 5 or 6 going to Emmett Johnson is probably the safe bet to keep him fresh. But we'll see what type of workload he gets on Saturday and how long they can maintain that. And number 3, can the defense continue their dominance? I heard Sean Callahan say that over 30 different guys got reps on D last week, and Luke Reimer was an example of somebody who's getting helped out by this rotation. Shenander kept his best 11 on the field and only rotated a couple of the starters. So now that Tony White trusts his depth, guys like Reimer can stay fresher longer and make a bigger impact as the season goes on. The defense ranks 29th this week, but Louisiana Tech's way better on offense than NIU was. They average over 5 yards a carry and 180 yards rushing a game. So going from playing the 54th, 122nd, and 127th rushing offenses to this is going to be a little bit more of a challenge. The Run D ranks 2nd nationally, only behind Air Force, so if they keep this energy going, that Michigan game could get pretty damn interesting a week from now. Now let's look at this week's storylines, because that's all I see pop up on Twitter, in the comments, or on the YouTube titles. First is the QB rotation. Satterfield told us that Sims took 55% of the reps in practice on Tuesday, but Rule said he's not ready to come back yet. I think the initial expectation was that he'd be out about 2 weeks, so that timeline means he won't get back to full go in practice until Sunday. The issue there is that if this staff believes he's the number 1 and has to take the first snaps against Michigan, they can't afford to sit him on the bench after he just played 2 terrible games to open the season. There's no question Heinrich plays a bunch on Saturday, but is he the starter? I'm not sure. Will Sims play a more limited role just so they can see him throw a bit and get comfortable enough to trust him with his ball handling in a big moment? No clue. Whether Sims is 100% or not probably isn't going to matter. They're going to have to give him some action. The question is, how much do they give him? Second is the new running back core. I think most of us are starting to see that although he wasn't the biggest in the room, Grant's probably the most skilled back they've got. And before the year started, I had him as the number one in my depth chart prediction. And outside of the fumbling issue, I still think he's the best back on the roster. Gabe's loss was detrimental because of the style of play, but with Grant, the chance to get great production's still there. Emmett Johnson will have to play too, since you need more than one running back. But does he get 5+ carries? Is he more of a receiving back, or is he just used to block? The rotation is going to look much different with so much inexperience, but facing a bottom 10 run D that's even worse than Illinois and Colorado is the perfect time to let these guys show what they can do. And last is the emerging defenders. Week 1, it was Deshaun Singleton and Omar Brown. Now we're seeing Hutmacher, Bayer, and Wright. Nash already has 10 tackles, 3.5 for loss, and 1.5 sacks, making him the most productive guy on the D-line so far. Bayer worked his way from special teams against Minnesota to rotating against Northern Illinois, and now in week 4, he's a rotational starter next to Borders and Sherman. Can promise you, nobody saw that coming. And Javen Wright, who dealt with injuries early in his career, was moved from safety to linebacker this summer. And Tony White made a point this week that he's a physical specimen who needed more opportunities than he was getting, but he needed to be put in the right spot. Now, after he missed an interception by just a couple inches in Boulder, he pulled one in last week, and as he gets more comfortable in his new role, I bet he makes even more plays. Nobody expects this one to be close, but the biggest traps always come before massive showdowns the following week. Colorado was a 23-point favorite over Colorado State, but they were thinking about Oregon and they barely pulled out the win in OT. Florida State was in the look-ahead spot against Boston College with a road trip to Clemson coming, and they only beat those guys by 2. Then down south, Georgia trailed South Carolina and had to pitch a second-half shutout to win because they were caught thinking about their game plan for UAB. Louisiana Tech's got that advantage too. Michigan's the number 2 team in the country, and as long as they beat Rutgers at home, that's not going to change. So let's talk about what they bring to the table and what Nebraska's got to prep for. Their head coach is Sonny Cumbie, who comes from the Mike Leach tree, so his offenses are pass first. But so far this year, the ground game's been more effective. They rank 45th in rushing offense, and they've got 2 backs who average 4.9 and 7.3 yards per carry. But all 3 defenses they've seen are atrocious. On almost every big play they make, you see an RPO where the QB fakes or gives it to the back, and his most productive receiver by far is a guy named Smoke Harris. He's averaging 6 catches a game for over 70 yards and looks like he could start at most of the Big Ten schools. His other option is Cyrus Allen, who's averaging 13 yards a catch, but gets half as many targets. The line's already given up 11 sacks on the year, so their pass blocking is obviously not as good as their run support, but facing a run D that holds offenses to less than 50 yards a game means they're going to have to throw a lot if they want a chance to win. Their QBs take decent care of the ball and only have 3 picks so far, but if Nebraska's scoring and Cumbie wants to keep pace, they're going to get aggressive and try to push downfield, so the Black Shirts are going to have some chances at takeaways, just like they did last week. On defense, they've been pretty bad, giving up almost 30 points a game and over 35 to SMU and North Texas, but their strength's against the pass. The problem with that this week is that Nebraska runs it more than they pass it, so the matchup's perfect in that sense, but it'll still be good to give Heinrich and Sims a little bit of a test before the schedule gets harder. In the 2 conference games, they gave up 250 on the ground, and they lost the time of possession battle by 7 minutes each week. So just imagine what Nebraska can do at home when their goal is going to be to run as much clock as possible just to get out of this week healthy. If there was a way to win in Lincoln, I'd say it's to shut down the run game, but they just don't have the size up front to win at the line or to make many big stops in the backfield. The betting line's pretty big for this one, so we got to talk about it. But before we do, I got to make sure that if you do want to bet on Nebraska, Oregon, or any of the NFL games this weekend, that you have a platform to use. Our sponsor for today's video is BroThrow, which is the #1 platform I use for sports betting because it's available in all 50 states. It doesn't require a deposit. There are no minimums or withdrawal requirements. And most importantly, you don't pay a 10% vig since it's not a sports book. We had a bunch of subscribers bet on Nebraska to cover last week, and they won. So if you're betting on spreads, totals, or money lines somewhere else, you can join us for free at brothrow.com/GBR to start saving on the juice today. Nebraska's a 21-point favorite this Saturday, and that's the biggest spread we're going to see for the rest of this season. I would have said expecting a 3 TD win would have been crazy, but they just did it last week with the backup quarterback. So maybe it's time we start expecting blowouts against these smaller schools, just like an SC or an Oklahoma fan would. My concern, like I mentioned before, is that this could be a look-ahead spot. The Michigan game is going to be huge for the city, for Matt Rule, and especially these players who don't feel like the losses to Colorado and Minnesota tell the story of how good this team really is. The NIU game was as perfect as I'd ever expect to see the offense play, and replicating that isn't going to be easy if we see two QBs come in and a brand new number 2 running back who hasn't carried it once in college yet. The total set at 47, which is a 1 point higher than the final we saw last week, which means Vegas thinks the Louisiana Tech offense might have more potential to score, and they predict a 34-13 game. I hate betting when I don't know what the QB situation is going to look like, so I'll be staying off this one completely. But if you did put a gun to my head, I'd probably take the under and expect Rule to run clock and get Grant off the field as early as possible to save him for Michigan. When you're as inconsistent as Nebraska's been, no game can be a trap game because you're so afraid to let another one slip away. Every week's a huge game when you're fighting for a bowl bid, so motivation's not going to be an issue here. I don't know how the points are going to come, and I think that's why I'm the most excited. Two QBs who have plenty of upside and just want to prove that they deserve that starting role. New running backs who get a chance to show what they can do, and a defense with 30-plus rotators who all see blood and know they can make a play. I'd be surprised to see the offense get to 40, so I'm going with Nebraska to win in dominating fashion, 37-17, and I just hope we get to go to bed that night with more confidence in whoever QB1's going to be once the conference slate starts. As much fun as it is to watch your team beat up on inferior competition, I'm honestly glad they started off with big road games against Minnesota and Colorado, even though they lost. Gaming the system to have the best record isn't fun. Big games are fun. Risk is fun. Now, I'm going to enjoy the cupcake games since they're good enough to win them, but I just can't wait to get through this weekend. But I want to know what you think, so let me know in the comments below. Who takes the first snap on Saturday? Will it be 7 or is 10 back in again? Are you going to the game this weekend or are you watching at home with me? And will Emmett Johnson get more or less than 10 carries? I'm going to say more, but there are a lot of mouths to feed in that backfield, even after the injuries. So we'll just have to wait and see. But that's all I've got for today. So until next time, thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Go Big Red.